Alex, thank you for taking time today. Maybe we can start with your introduction. Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. I'm currently a VP Product Adoption Lead for JPMorgan Chase. I'm based in Glasgow, Scotland. I've been through a lot of different technology roles since I started my career. I come from a non-traditional background. I did business management and publishing media. And then I realized that actually I want to go in technology. And I went through a conversion program. I was a software engineer for a while, working on developing virtual assistants. After that, I moved more into kind of like a tech center developer management environment. And after that, I fell in love with public cloud, and the opportunity arose for me to move to Scotland and do that as my job and, evangelize, advocate for the benefits of public cloud, grow our adoption, work a lot on developer marketing, a lot on documentation, training. So here we are today. My goal for last year in terms of public speaking was to speak at reInvent, US's annual cloud conference. And I actually managed to achieve that. I represented my organization. I talked about building Cloud Center of Excellence. And yeah, here we are today. New year, January 2023. It's going to be exciting. And I'm really, really happy to be here to speak with you.
Congratulations on that. Just wanted to let you know that I got to know about you from the dev.to blog post about your speaking experience at reInvent. That was great. And yeah, again, congratulations. Just wanted to know that, do you see any difference in terms of traditional marketing and compared to developer marketing? Do you see it different? How do you approach the developer marketing?
So there are commonalities and there are differences. I think in more traditional product marketing, you're trying to entice and spark some emotion in someone to purchase your product or try your product or kind of be convinced that it's amazing and delightful and magical. With developer marketing, you have a much more tough crowd. These people aren't people that are going to be, they're not going to fall for shiny new things or for things that promise to like solve world peace, because inherently they're the type of person who's going to evaluate, it's going to research, it's going to look at like what you're offering, how it compares to something that they've tried before or other products. They're very, very opinionated. They're very honest. And the beauty of that is that when you convert them into adopting and using your product, they will then be very good advocates and evangelists for your product. But you need to get to the point where they love your product, they enjoy using your product, they're invested in your product, they really want to see it succeed, and they really want to share it with their colleagues, their managers, their friends, and talk about, how amazing this thing is that's allowing me to do all of these wonderful things, and it's making my developer experience better. So I think that's kind of the main difference that then spans into all the other things that might be different. So for example, if you're going to maybe, let's take Netflix as an example. If you're Netflix and you want to market your product, obviously it's a lot about the content they consume. They don't necessarily think about the platform that you're building. You don't have to sell your platform. You're basically selling the experience of being able to access all the movies or all the series that you like, you enjoy, maybe don't even know that you enjoy yet. But you don't think about what Netflix actually produces, which is the platform that allows you to consume this content. With developer marketing, it's not as, here you have this thing and it does everything without you needing to learn, train, read anything else. Oftentimes, developers, when they get a new software, a new product, a new service, they will want to go and see, okay, so what do you offer? How does it work? Where's my tutorial? Where's my documentation? I have this problem. Where's like the explanation of what this error means? And I think that's inherently different because you have to prepare for a whole suite of things that they will expect from your product. And again, like everything literally that spans from the difference of they're this type of persona compared to the regular persona you would sell a product to. They have different needs, they have different expectations, they have different standards, and they expect a completely different suite of capabilities that you as a developer marketer or as a product manager actually provide to them. So yeah, we can talk about this all day. But mainly I think it's the difference what their needs are, who they are as a persona and as a person, and also like what they expect from products that they consume. That's the main differences between, selling Netflix and selling to developers. But also, I think, sorry, one last thing, you also need to consider that to them, potentially it's not about the cost, because a lot of times if you're a developer in a company, you're not paying directly for that service. Your company is, and your company has to make these decisions, and you as a developer can provide your feedback, your input. Does this work? Would this work? Should we get this? Should we not? Should we change it? Does it work for our community of developers? And I think when you take out the element of price, then it becomes even more difficult, because you can't go to a developer and tell them like, well, but this is going to be $1 a month instead of 1,000. They're going to be like, so what? I don't care. I don't pay for it. So it's very different. And then you have like, the whole open source side where people don't pay for it, and people do it, and developers do it, and other technologists do it because they are passionate about it. And it's very difficult to kind of like incentivize them in a way that works for every open source project. So yeah, it's a very, very different breed of marketing that unfortunately not many people do, and there's not a lot of kind of great pathways or support to kind of teach you these things. And generally you just have to listen and iterate and feedback, and that's how you learn what works for your specific product that you're marketing.
Great. You nailed it. Just to have a follow-up question on that. Regarding, you talked about it's not about just selling it to the developers. It's about more providing them the value, giving them the tools necessary to play around. There might be other tools. So why? What is the value in them? Why they should pay? Is that a way why the importance of community comes into picture, where you don't start selling to them, but instead you build a community where you put a really nice point that if your tool is really good, if it's really solving their problem, they're going to be the advocates, and they're going to be telling to their other fellow developers. They're going to be advocating in the company where they work. Hey, this is the tool I would like to work for. This is so good, and this can make our efficiency, developer workflow efficiency. So I'm going to recommend this if you're going to take this. Is that a way, is the community is a go-to way to address this? Can you tell us a little bit about on that?
Yeah, sure. I think community is a very big part of developer experience. Whether it's community outside of your workplace, whether it's community within your workplace. I think because sometimes we have to solve these very complex problems with maybe environments, languages, products that we are not familiar with, we go back to that need of wanting to have someone there to reassure us and guide us and try to help us, if not actually help us. And I feel that in developer environments or engineering environments, people want to have that sense of kind of belonging and support. And sometimes, for example, you might be the only UI developer in a team, and you can't find that support and that way to reach out and maybe have a conversation or troubleshoot with someone that has the same set of skills. So automatically you're looking at a community, whether it's, maybe you're a React developer, and whether it's the React developer community, whether you actually want to start contributing to the React open source project, whether it's internally, you have your own communities of practice where you can meet other React developers, but maybe not in the same organization, maybe not in the same location, but you have the same job, the same skill set, and you can rely on each other. And that then has a bigger influence on, what they decide to use, not use, advocate, not advocate for, because, we trust more if someone comes to us and says, hey, I've done this, I've worked with this, it works, here's how. And then you're like, okay, that is so simple, that is so easy, it would work for me. I have this project I'm working on and that would be perfect for what I'm doing, make my job like so much easier. And then you kind of inadvertently you've sold them, but you haven't even realized that you've done that. And I think in communities that are so, astute and so honest, and so I don't want to see all the shiny things. I want to have them, but that's not what I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at the nitty-gritty, ugly truth behind your product to see if it's actually as good as you claim it to be in your marketing. And in that kind of scenario, they will trust people that have the same set of skills, the same, environment, community that they're part of, because they know that, I know this person, we've been, in the same community, working on things, seeing them, understanding who they are, maybe having a catch up, maybe meeting in person at a conference. And if they say that, I'm going to trust what they say. So, communities can be your downfall if your product doesn't meet their criteria, or if you have a few people that have very strong opinions and you don't actually go into that community. And, if that's the case, then you could lose out on a major, major benefit to your company, to your product, to your service that you're selling them. But additionally, the flip side is if you do sell it to them and they do go for it, they could convince a lot of other developers in their community to do the same and to support you and to evangelize for you and to kind of take your product further and have that feedback and build up relationship for it. There were the CMX Community Awards last night, and Adrian, who I've had the luck to meet in, 2019 at DevRelCon in London. So he was doing the keynote for it. And the thing that, I was listening to him and I was like, oh my God, like that is so true. There was one thing that he said, and he said, if you have, for example, some customers that have a use case and they want you to build a case study for it or a solution for it, and then you have a community of really, really engaged advocates for your product from the developer side, build that relationship so they get the recognition by providing that case study and that kind of like visibility to those customers that want that. And you've satisfied the both parts of your kind of reach. So you have them gaining recognition and being recognized as being amazing and contributors and, advocating for your product. And then you have that demand that you might not always have the capacity to solve for, that's being satisfied because these really, really great people in your community are willing to do that to gain that recognition. So yeah, community, super important. It can be, boosting your trajectory or your downfall. So you need to make sure that you're listening, you're showing to them that you're listening, that you're implementing the changes. And again, that's where the marketing comes in. You might go to them and say, we want to know what you think. And if it comes back and it's pretty negative, take those things, talk to your product managers, talk to your engineers, try to solve for them, and then go back to them and say, right, here's all the things you said are wrong. Here's how we're trying to solve them. Does this make it better? Is it now fit for your use? Is it what you were expecting it to be? So yeah, that's on community and and the whole like big tree of what that means.
Yeah, I think that's great and great insights. So community is more a long-term game where you kind of building a trust. It's not going to happen in 1 or 2 days. So it's going to take time. And it's also a great opportunity for you to build a relationship with your customer. If you're writing a case study, collaborate with them, give them a recognition, and also get your opportunity to learn a lot of feedback. You're going to get a ruthless feedback, and it's an opportunity to you to improve the product and also improve your messaging, so you can be more transparent about what your product is capable of. So that's a kind of way, iterative way of continuously improving your messaging, so that feels more natural to developers. Great insights on that. And I think another question I wanted to follow up from your difference between developer marketing and the traditional marketing. You talked about, as a developer, as a user, they don't care about the pricing much. I think you put a really important point, that a great way to put it as, like, think about as your customer in two ways, like a users and a buyers. The buyers might be your VP of engineering or engineering manager, or who might be making a buying decision that I'm going to set this budget for the tooling for the teams. Whereas as a developer, as a user, I see from a developer experience is the documentation, tooling, all those things are quite good. I really like working on it. I can only influence my engineering manager or my CTO that I'm going to say, hey, this is a tool, we should buy it, which we can make life really great. So looking into these angles from a user perspective and also from a buyer perspective, I think messaging needs and totally makes sense. And coming to the, you touched a little bit on the, what does the success looks like and what does the failure looks like. Community can be success or failure. How one can measure, hey, I'm doing really good here. It can also be adoption.
Yeah.
It can also be like, how do you measure your success? Like, I'm going in the right direction, or something I need to pivot, I need to change something.
Yeah, I think this is really difficult. And I think the difficulty doesn't lie in the fact that you can't measure it. It lies in the fact that it's very specific to your specific product and to your specific customers. I think when people say, like, how do you measure community success? How do you measure developer marketing success? How do you measure DevRel? It's really, really difficult because there is no one set of metrics. There is no one set of OKRs. There is no one reporting framework that you can use, because it depends very much on what you're trying to achieve. So, for example, are you a new product and you're looking to get as much feedback and as much, let's say, touch points onto your product? And is that your first goal? So is it more to inform kind of like your beta stage release? Are you trying to get that kind of like visibility and understanding of, right, is this going to make it, or do we need to make some changes before we go, pay for this service? And that will be measured in various ways. So you could say, okay, so we're going to start with, blog posts, maybe Twitch streams, maybe events, maybe we're going to go to conferences, maybe we're going to go and do some talks, and then try to track those. Maybe you're going to use some, web analytics and see like how many people from each of your engagements actually made it onto the platform, how many of those actually tried out your product, how many of them returned after 7 days, a month, to actually continue using your product. You might also use them to do maybe some user interviews and see like some of them that didn't come back, some of them that did come back, what was that cause? And that could be, a really valuable set of metrics for you for that specific use case. So I think people want it all. So they want to be able to measure, I don't know, 20 experiments, 50 objectives or goals with like 10 metrics in one report. And that's just not going to happen, because the moment you kind of like abstract it to such a level that you have like 10 key metrics for, 100 different things, that doesn't work. However, you should have a set of key metrics that are specific to your product that can tell you are we going the right way? So in terms of adoption, for example, like for your business to be sustainable, maybe you need to have, a certain amount of people purchasing and using your product continuously for 6 months to give you some security. And that is a good metric for you to be like, are we on track? Are we not on track? How are we doing holistically? Now, when you're doing things like developer marketing, you will have to have some smaller goals that feed into that bigger goal that you're going to be able to measure in their specific ways. Again, like, for example, if you did event attendance, if event attendance was your metric, that would be a bit of a vanity metric, because if you had 1,000 people attend your webinar, but only 50 of those clicked your link and only one of those actually used your product, that's not really a very good use of that metric, because it might look great. Like people might be like, oh my God, like this is fantastic. But the outcome is you've had one person use your service and maybe after 7 days, they're not using it anymore. So are you really, you can use that to inform what you're doing and say like, okay, my conversion rate is super low. Am I really showing them what they want to see? Am I leading with the main kind of like wins of my product? Am I actually targeting the right people in the right channels? Like, am I going to communities where I know that this product would be useful and having them come? Am I just putting it on LinkedIn for everyone to see? And I end up with like all of these people signing up, but none of them will actually use my product. So I think like they can inform what you're doing, but looking at them really, really intently and understanding, am I actually measuring what matters, or am I just measuring what looks good? How does that actually feed into your product development, your product lifecycle, your adoption rates? And again, like even with adoption rates, like you might look at it and be like, oh my God, like we're doing, we're getting so many people in the trial phase, but then they suddenly don't use it and then they suddenly drop off the trial. And it's like, yeah, because something there isn't working. Either you're not presenting to them what the benefits are, why they should use it, either it's too hard to use it. So that's when you need to go and dig deeper and maybe do some interviews, maybe do some user testing again, maybe go through all of those steps and understand, okay, what is breaking down in this? Because we have a lot of initial attraction, but then we have no adoption. So somewhere in between of that, something's happened. So I think coming back to the question of, measuring developer marketing and everything kind of like developer relations related is really difficult, because you really, really have to think about, the why of your product, the what of your product, the like, what are my goals and what am I actually trying to measure, and how are these important to my product? And it's really, really hard. Like we're still iterating through some things. Like every time we think about a new initiative or a new kind of like experiment that we've never done before, we do look at it and we're like, okay, this looks great, but how do we know if we're successful? So what is our end goal here with doing this? Is it just for people to have fun and just for people to like, gain some recognition? Then that's fair, because that's that's what we're doing it for. But is there a deeper meaning for this, or is it just, a fun social gathering for this? And don't get me wrong, sometimes those are great because you get to have people talking together and there's no like hard push, or like you're not there to kind of pester them, you're just there to get them together talking and associate, your product with that kind of experience and, the value that they got from that. But equally, if you do have a deeper purpose, make sure that that's clear in how you organize it, how you design it, how you measure it, what your expectations are afterwards. And it's a lot of trial and error until you get there. But when you do get there and you see the correlation between your goals and the metrics and measurements, that's when you're like, okay, I got it. Like this is the good one. This is what I need to see, and this is the, reveals to me the true value of what I'm doing and how it contributes to the product adoption and product kind of like maintenance in terms of, people staying, people going, people telling me what it's missing, people telling me what they wish it would have. But that's why, like, I think PM's jobs are super difficult because you might get all of these requests or feedback, but then you need to like evaluate and analyze and prioritize. And sometimes it's not an easy decision to communicate. And it's really hard to tell people that, even though we know would be cool, realistically, not enough people use it to make this investment into that section. But equally, you might discover that something that you thought, I don't really know if it would work, you experiment with it, and then you have like adoption skyrocketing because people really, really needed that. They just were too frustrated to actually tell you that they wanted something like that. Or maybe they didn't even know that they wanted it.
Yeah, I think you nailed it really well about what to measure. I think having clarity about what are you trying to measure and optimize it. We can fool ourselves very easily by looking into the vanity metrics or just leading indicators. The example you gave about the webinars, the number of registrations, number of people attended. What if they're not going to try out your product? That's absolutely great. And I was thinking about when you're trying to explain that, what are the ways we can detect those success or failures? Be transparent about like that, hey, this is an experiment, I've not done it before, I would like to see if it's a success. I'm gonna take some learnings and I'm gonna repeat it times because this works, we have seen it. Or hey, this is what I said, it's a failure for me and it didn't work as I expected, my assumption based on my previous knowledge. Hey, these are the things, it's not clear to me what's wrong. It's easy to get into that stage, but it's very hard to analyze, hey, what I'm doing wrong. What are the ways you can think about? For example, you talked about in the community stage, getting closer to the developers and building trust with them and listening to their feedback and trying to make changes of your messaging, changes of your way you communicate. That could be one way. Is there a way you do like, hey, this is a failed experiment? How can I learn a retrospect where I can learn and I would not repeat that step again, but instead I would correct it, optimize it. Maybe my messaging could be better, or maybe my target for what I'm trying to target is not aligned, or things like that. Do you see any kind of ways where we can detect those failed things and what is the reasoning behind it and how we can rectify what's not working?
So I actually had something like this happen last year. I was working on organizing this big event, and it was meant to be like super, engaging. We wanted to do something completely new. We wanted to do something with a lot of people. We wanted to have like something super, super cool. But we only had about 6 months to try to plan it and make it happen. And with that, it wasn't like the primary scope of my role. It was just something that I was really passionate about and really, really wanted to make it happen and help people out. And we started planning, we started looking at, okay, what do we need? How do we get it? Who should be involved? What's the leadership that we need to engage, like gain their approval and like gain their sponsorship and stuff. And it was kind of moving along, but the longer it was taking, the more the team I was working with, like I was in trying to make this happen, the more we started kind of seeing some red flags. Like we didn't have everyone turning up to like the planning meetings, or we were waiting on someone to like sign off on saying, yep, this looks okay as a budget request, or we were saying we need to have this invitation created and marketing thing created and all of this by this date, and the date was coming and no one was saying anything about it, and no one was kind of like updating anything like, oh hey, we finished the branding, or hey, we finished this. And I think that was kind of in the minds of a lot of us. It was all kind of like we were kind of looking at each other and like, this is most likely a bad idea. Like we're now getting super close to when, we should already have all these things in place. We were going to make it super engaging, super exciting. And the more we were kind of like rushing towards it, the more we started to see like all the flags of this is probably not the best time to do this. And maybe we should just table it. And if anyone, wants to revive it, we'll have all documentation. We did a postmortem afterwards to figure out like, like what didn't work out, why didn't it not work out, and why we took the decision of just stopping all work on it and just being like, right, it's not going to happen this year. We could look at it next year, but we'll have to see how things progress. And definitely we need to start planning way further in advance and get the sponsorship and everything agreed way in advance, because it was, we didn't want to give it up because we were so invested in it. And we knew that a lot of people that we kind of got their feedback from, that we discussed with from the community, they were really excited about it and the possibility of it. And we really wanted to make it happen. But the reality was we didn't have enough time. The resources were not full-time allocated. Everything was just pretty difficult to make because it was bringing people from a couple of different locations to one place. And everything was like really iffy because it was still end of the pandemic, kind of like lockdowns and stuff. So we were all like, we don't think this is the right time. And we're definitely not, where we want to be. And we would probably be disappointed with the quality of the event that we've put together at the end of it. So I think even though we spent, time and energy trying to make it happen, and then we were kind of hoping that it's not going to fail, or not fail, but that it's not going to be cut short and we're not actually going to get to the end of realizing it. But that's when we realized that, you know what, if we feel that it's so unlikely to materialize into what we hoped it would be, and then we started looking at everything and like all of our planning and all of our deadlines and timelines and our roadmap for what we're going to do, we're just like that. It's looking at it objectively, not going to happen. And I think that's something that we sometimes forget. We're so passionate, we're so driven, we're so committed that we forget to take a step back and look at things objectively and look at the numbers, look at the timelines, look at like the resources, and kind of like go back to that prioritization and be like, okay, if we were to make this happen and we were to prioritize and we were to like plan, will it actually happen with the constraints that we currently have? And the answer is no. And I think that was really hard for us to accept. But I feel that writing that postmortem, putting in writing those, what was the reason that we decided to do this? What were the red flags that we saw that it won't work? Why did we decide to take this decision? What did it save? The fact that we took this decision knowing that it might fail. And what are the suggestions and learnings that if we want to do this again or someone wants to pick it up, what should they be aware of before they even start planning? So it's not the fact that, experiments are meant to either fail or succeed. That's what an experiment is. You're trying to prove a hypothesis. You're trying to see if this is going to work. And in the constraints of the experiment we ran, it just didn't work. And the earlier we realized that before we started, actually investing additional resources and things in it, the better it was for us. And I think people also forget leadership does not mind you telling them this is a bad idea, as long as you can tell them why it's a bad idea. And if you have some measurements, if you have some metrics, if you have some valid points of why this is not going to work, they won't be upset. They'll be happy because you've saved them money, time, resources, whatever it is. So I think there's this weird feeling that if you go to someone in your leadership and you tell them, we've tried this, it's not going to work, or it hasn't worked, or we don't think we should be investing more in something that we know will fail, they won't be mad. They'll be happy because you've saved them money and time and resources. But you need to tell them why. Why is it going to fail? Why do you think it's going to fail? What's giving you the indicators that it's going to fail? And I think that's the main point. It's, you know, if you have the opportunity and the luck to be in organizations where people trust you enough to tell you you can experiment, you can try things out, you can see where it goes, and they don't just want you to kind of like have win after win after win after win. That's a great organization to be in, by the way. But also you need to understand that they're not telling you this because they're expecting you to succeed every time. They're telling you this because they expect you sometimes to fail and come back to them and say, no, this is not a good idea and I do not recommend it, and this is why. So yeah, I mean, it's it's a tough conversation to have, and it's a tough thing to admit to yourself that, I had this brilliant idea, if only it worked. Well, maybe it was brilliant, but maybe not in the current conditions. And there's nothing to say about you. And I think the more you experiment and figure out what works and what doesn't for your product and for your community, the better it will be long term. But again, it's not a short term game. You kind of need to iterate and experiment and figure out things. Sometimes you can have riskier experiments than others, depending on, market conditions, company conditions, what you're trying to do. Sometimes you can go, with what it works for your product and community, but sometimes you can, if you have the space, the resources to do that, go a bit different and see like where that leads you. Like Spotify Wrapped, it's one of my favorite things about Spotify. They did that as an experiment and people love it. Like people post it, share it on social media. Everyone loves their Wrapped kind of like album because it contains everything you love and you've listened to your entire year. And it started off as an experiment and it was brilliant and it still is brilliant. And other companies are now adopting it, like Duolingo and Airbnb, and everyone is like, oh, we're going to do a Wrapped. But it paid off for them. They have dozens of other projects that they've tried that failed. But it's about that one experiment that's going to be just game changing for what you do. And if you don't try ever, and if you're not willing to admit that sometimes it just doesn't work, you're never going to get to that super, super amazing experiment that's going to change your product's life. Yeah, sorry.
That's great. I think that's a great story to understand that you cannot work in an old style where you have a plan for 6 months and you're going to execute it. It's about uncovering the risks, like what are the smallest tests you can do, validate it quickly. For example, on the case of, you talked about the event, let me see how much interests are there. Can I create a simple Google form where they're going to request or register or pay some amount of money, a small amount of investment, where I start selling a ticket that I have enough interest on this, so I'm going to have a clear ROI. Instead of spending a lot of things on our hand, do we get some enough sponsors? What are the ways we can validate our assumptions are true? Being mindful about that. That way we can kind of get these tests on in the beginning. So kind of we're honest about our situation and be open about there can be another 10 more ideas which I can validate it. It's not the only one I'm going to be working on. Kind of more like when you were explaining me the story, for me, I was thinking that more like it's quite popular in the product space where MVP, minimum viable product, and you got different versions. I think being a developer marketing or in a marketing in essence, like we should also think in terms of what is an MVP looks like, what's like where we can have a regular checkpoints and where we can be really honest about, hey, this is what I wanted to have. I have a strong feeling that I can go ahead and work on it because of so-and-so reasons. Be more kind of admit that checkpoints, and so that way we can avoid months of effort, and it's also money for, it costs money. Time is also money. It's a development or the resources you're going to be spending on that where you don't have a really good result. And I also really like that the way you said about your leadership team wants to be you to come and say, hey, these are the 10 ideas. Out of those, 8 is going to be failing, only 2 going to be succeeding. And we are open to experiment. We don't have done before. It's kind of uncertainty is quite high. And these are the experiment. These are the things, ideas we have done it several times. We know that this thing's going to work and we're going to be doing that. In addition, we're going to be running these experiments, and having that transparency can definitely bring more clarity, alignment with the leadership. That's great story. Just my last question, how do you stay kind of up to date on developer marketing ideas, strategies? Where do you look for resources or a blog post or watch some podcasts or read some books? What are your sources of stay up to date and for community, developer marketing, and developer relations?
Yeah. So this is a mix because it's very weird to me how there are a lot of things in product marketing, in product management, in community management that are actually directly linked to developer marketing. And weirdly enough, I'm part of a lot of different communities that are not specifically developer marketing. Like, yes, I'm part of developer marketing communities too, but they're usually very small because there are not that many people that do this job. But I am part of a lot of product communities, the community management communities, product marketing management communities, because all of the kind of like conversations and resources that I find in there, they are actually related to my job and what I do. But those people sometimes don't know that. And to me, like sometimes it's really funny how like people are talking about something and I'm like, oh, like, yeah, this applies to my job. And they don't actually know that it's more than just, their own product marketing community, that it can leverage that information. I'm also part of my internal, so communities of practice at work. We have our own communities of practice. They're called Ignite. And I've been a fervent advocate of them since they started. I started them in Bournemouth about 5-6 years ago in our location. I've organized like a few colliders with them. Basically, we invited external communities and meetups to come and meet with our internal communities and do like an exchange of sessions and knowledge and get to know each other. So I think communities are really important to me because they're people there know the type of things that other people like and other people are interested in. So like there's throw in like this course or this article or this blog or this book, and that's really easy for me to then pick up. The second thing is, and here I'm going to be controversial, but I do take a lot of care and I do take a lot of curiosity in who I follow or add on LinkedIn. So sometimes I'll add people that I know and that I've met. Sometimes I'll add people that I aspire to meet or that I look up to. Sometimes I add people that have just really interesting content. So I get kind of like a mix of views and levels of experience and industries that they work in. So I think my LinkedIn feed is probably one of my most used resources because every time I like scroll through it, I take a few minutes every day to like scroll and see what's. I find like this new event I want to go to, or this new article I want to read, or this new book I want to read, or this new person like coming up on my feed and like sharing something amazing that I've never heard about before. And again, I try to keep like a very diverse set of industries. So I look at everything that I really aspire and appreciate. So things like gaming, things like music, things like arts, things like economy, like based organizations, NGOs, humanitarian organizations, eco-friendly organizations. Like I have an entire mix of like industries because I want to be able to see, what's happening in other places and how could I learn or take something from that and bring it into my own. Um, Honestly, I would say with the demise of Twitter, LinkedIn is your next best guess for like who to follow and where to learn. Subscribing to some newsletters that you find interesting. I subscribe to Diversify Tech, and they send out a mix of job roles, events, speaking opportunities. And I do subscribe to Make Work Better, I think it's called, by Bruce Daisley. I get some really interesting and diverse snippets, and you can read more or watch more afterwards. And that's really, really good. It's not necessarily product focused, but it's work focused in today's age. And then I have a variety of product management, kind of like newsletters and blogs that I follow. And yeah, I just try to keep an open mind, keep an open network so I can see like different things, so I can learn from different people. But I just think it's being curious, honestly. That's the best thing you could do. Being curious, joining communities, getting involved. You're going to be surprised at how much that helps, whether it's looking for a job, looking for a fresh idea, looking for someone to bounce an idea off, or just, looking for a sense of belonging. I think it's really, really important, especially when you're in a niche kind of like job role. That's really, really important to be, and I think to other people.
Yeah. Thank you. I think this is great. And I agree that I'm also coming as a developer and worked as a technical product manager and now a developer-focused product marketing. I totally agree with you that there are a lot of kind of overlap between these different developer-focused PM, product marketing, and developer relations, which can be useful. And yeah, so thanks a lot also for sharing your source of inspiration is the curiosity and how getting involved in the community can really help you get new ideas, help you grow you professionally, and also your LinkedIn as a way of feeds as your way to get a lot of new content based on your curation that you're going to follow, or you're going to accept connections based on your interest, and also not limited just only on the developer marketing, where you also get inspiration from music industry, from and other way to stay curious. That's great. And it has been really great conversation, Alex. Thank you very much for taking time today. So I'm done with my questions, and I just have one more question, which is, again, I'm not going to share it on the podcast, but it's like, is there anybody I should invite for the talk? Great. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you very much for taking time, and I really enjoyed talking to you.